The silver screen has always been a landscape of gods and monsters, a shimmering mirage built on velvet seats, blinding flashbulbs, and the intoxicating scent of celluloid. For over a century, the dream factory of Hollywood manufactured a specific kind of immortality, spinning ordinary mortals into timeless legends whose every smile, tear, and arched eyebrow could captivate millions across the globe. We watched them conquer the world under the warm glow of the studio spotlights, existing in a realm where aging seemed impossible and drama was strictly reserved for the script. But time, the ultimate arbiter, has a way of dimming even the most brilliant marquees, leaving behind only a precious few who remember the true alchemy of that golden age. Today, we stand at the edge of a monumental twilight, looking out at the final, surviving titans of an era that is quietly drawing its final curtain, the last keepers of a sacred cinematic fire. To understand the magnitude of their survival, one must step back into the smoke-filled theatres and lavish premiere galas of the mid-20th century, a time when cinema was the undisputed centre of the cultural universe. This was an empire built on grand illusions, where a single debut could alter the course of pop culture forever, and where the line between the person and the persona was meticulously blurred by all-powerful studio bosses. In this world of pristine facades and carefully curated glamour, stars were treated as royalty, draped in diamonds and tailored tuxedos, paraded before worshipful audiences who hung on their every word. Yet, beneath the deafening applause and the blinding flash of the paparazzi bulbs, a different story was always unfolding in the shadows of the studio lots. It was a world of intense pressure, hidden sacrifices, and fierce rivalries, where the cost of fame was often paid in ways the public was never permitted to see. As we look at these legends now, navigating the vast and rapidly changing landscape of the modern world, it is impossible not to feel a profound sense of nostalgia for the elegance, grit, and wit they brought to the screen. They are the individuals who didn't just witness history, they actively sculpted it, leaving their indelible signatures on the very fabric of our collective imagination. From the sophisticated blondes who defined suspense to the sharp-witted masters of satire who taught a generation how to laugh at the absurd, these icons represent the absolute pinnacle of show business versatility. They survived the brutal transition from the old studio system to the radical shifts of modern television, proving that true talent possesses a magnetism that transcends decades, technology, and fashion. But survival in Hollywood is never just a matter of longevity. It is a testament to an underlying resilience, a quiet strength that kept these individuals grounded while the industry around them fractured and reinvented itself. For every triumph celebrated with a golden statuette, there were behind-the-scenes struggles, artistic battles, and personal crossroads that threatened to derail their trajectories. Some found themselves fighting against the political currents of their time, while others wrestled with the heavy burden of an iconic character that threatened to consume their entire identity. As the years marched on, many watched their contemporaries fade into the history books, leaving them to carry the heavy mantle of an entire generation's legacy alone. The brilliance and grandeur we still associate with their names are not just remnants of the past. They are armor forged through decades of navigating the volatile, beautiful, and often treacherous world of celebrity. The journey into the heart of this golden empire always began with a spark of raw ambition, a moment where ordinary individuals stepped into the frame and found themselves transformed by the camera's lens. This was an era where a single performance could launch a newcomer into the stratosphere of global celebrity, as Eva Marie Saint discovered when she stepped onto the gritty, wind-whipped docks of cinema history. Winning an Academy Award for her very first feature film, opposite Marlon Brando in On the Waterfront, she instantly became the blueprint for a new kind of screen heroine, one who combined delicate, ethereal vulnerability with a fierce, uncompromising intelligence. Hollywood quickly realized that her grace was a formidable weapon, leading her into the meticulously styled world of Alfred Hitchcock, where she embodied the ultimate enigmatic, elegant blonde in North by Northwest. Yet, behind that pristine, sophisticated facade lay the grueling reality of a studio system that demanded absolute perfection, where every costume fitting was a battle of wills and every close-up was engineered to project an illusion of effortless majesty. While some conquered the silver screen through quiet intensity. Others tore through the rigid conventions of classical Hollywood with the weapon of absolute absurdity, rewriting the rules of what was permissible in polite society. Mel Brooks emerged as a disruptive, brilliant force of nature, a visionary satirist who possessed a profound, almost instinctual understanding of old Hollywood's tropes, only to gleefully tear them apart. Through timeless masterpieces like The Producers, Blazing Saddles, and Young Frankenstein, he transformed fearlessness into an art form, using sharp wit and musical instinct to challenge the boundaries of comedy. Behind the scenes, however, his career was a constant chess match against nervous studio executives, budget constraints, and the perpetual threat of censorship from an establishment that feared his radical, boundary-pushing parody. It was a golden age of laughter built on a foundation of intense creative tension, proving that making the world laugh required a serious, often exhausting dedication to the craft of subversion. For others, the path to immortality was not a smooth ascent, but rather a treacherous mountain to climb, filled with sudden downfalls and miraculous defiant resurrections. Lee Grant's early career stood as a stark reminder of the hidden dangers lurking beneath the industry's glamorous surface, where political paranoia during the Cold War could freeze a skyrocketing trajectory in an instant. Blacklisted at the very height of her youthful promise, she refused to let the silence consume her, enduring years of forced exile before staging one of the most powerful, triumphant comebacks the industry had ever witnessed. Her eventual Oscar victory for Shampoo was not just an accolade for her immense acting talent. It was a validation of a fearless, resilient spirit that refused to be broken by institutional cruelty. She went on to shatter further glass ceilings by stepping behind the camera as an acclaimed, socially conscious documentary director, proving that the true measure of a Hollywood icon is found not in how brightly they shine under the spotlight, but in how they navigate the darkness when those lights are abruptly turned off. At the same time, the traditional studio machinery was busy manufacturing a more classical, intoxicating brand of glamour, leaning heavily on the timeless appeal of romance, beauty, and public fascination. Terry Moore captured the quintessential spirit of 1950s Hollywood, earning an Academy Award nomination for Comeback Little Sheba, while simultaneously capturing the imagination of the public through her high-profile presence. Yet, the true drama of her life was whispered about in the darkened corners of Hollywood restaurants and executive suites, her long, deeply secretive romance with the eccentric, reclusive billionaire Howard Hughes. This shadowy relationship added an undeniable layer of mystique to her public persona, illustrating how the lives of these mid-century idols were often intertwined with wealth, power, and secrecy, far beyond the reach of the movie scripts. The facade was one of perfect, sun-drenched charm, but the reality was a complex web of behind-the-scenes intrigues forced young stars to mature quickly in a world where everyone was watching. Yet no one truly knew the whole truth as the silver screen evolved. The burgeoning medium of television began to create its own pantheon of legendary figures, individuals who brought a distinct theatrical energy directly into the living rooms of millions of families. John Astin became a delightfully eccentric television icon, forever cementing his place in pop culture as Gomez Addams, the passionately romantic, wildly charming patriarch of the original 1964 classic The Addams Family. His playful energy and stylized operatic approach to the character brought a refreshing touch of macabre brilliance to an era dominated by wholesome, predictable family sitcoms. Similarly, across the Atlantic, British comedy was finding its own towering genius in John Cleese, whose sharp-witted, fearless satire with Monty Python and the masterfully tense Fawlty Towers altered the global comedic landscape forever. These performers understood that television required a different kind of intimacy, a relentless commitment to characters who were larger than life yet strangely relatable, carving out legacies that would endure long after the original broadcasts faded into static. The transition into the latter half of the century brought a wave of sophisticated, independent women who redefined what it meant to be a leading lady in an increasingly modern world. Candice Bergen emerged as a true pop culture landmark, embodying the fierce, brilliant spirit of investigative journalism as Murphy Brown, a role that earned her 5 Emmy Awards and placed her at the center of national conversation. Her sharp comic timing, natural elegance, and underlying wit proved that a woman could be glamorous, formidable, and uncompromising all at once, shattering the old stereotypes of the passive studio starlet. In stark contrast to this intense journalistic energy stood the debonair, ultra-stylish screen presence of George Hamilton, a man who turned the concept of the classic Hollywood gentleman into a fine art. Famous for his trademark, perpetual suntan and effortless charm, he breezed through decades of entertainment, showing a brilliant comic self-awareness in Love at First Bite and later anchoring major cinematic milestones like The Godfather Part 3, proving that staying power in the Dream Factory often required a willingness to play along with the grand illusion itself. The transition from the relative safety of the studio lots to the wider, unpredictable arena of the late 20th century forced many of these icons into severe personal and professional crises, revealing the deep fractures hidden beneath the industry's polished exterior. For Russ Tamblyn, who had soared to global fame with his dazzling acrobatic choreography as Riff, the fierce leader of the Jets in the legendary 1961 musical West Side Story, the sudden shift in the cultural landscape proved to be a profound turning point. The industry that had once celebrated his explosive physical energy began to struggle with how to cast an aging dancer in an era turning toward gritty, cynical realism. Tamblyn found himself navigating a painful professional wilderness, stepping away from the traditional spotlight to find his footing as an artist and counterculture figure. It took decades of quiet perseverance before a younger generation of filmmakers discovered his unique eccentric depth, leading to his brilliant cult resurrection as the bizarre Hawaiian shirt-wearing psychiatrist Dr. Lawrence Jacoby in David Lynch's Twin Peaks, proving that the greatest drama of a Hollywood career is often the struggle to survive your own early success. While some wrestled with the burden of early iconography, others faced the unique, silent pressure of carrying a legendary family name through the volatile waters of show business. Beau Bridges entered the industry under the long, formidable shadow of his father, Lloyd Bridges, a positioning that demanded he constantly prove his own artistic worth rather than rely on nepotistic privilege. Throughout his decades of steady, understated work in film and television, Bridges cultivated a reputation for deep empathy and natural warmth, culminating in the critical triumph of The Fabulous Baker Boys alongside his brother, Jeff Bridges. Yet, behind that collaborative victory lay a lifetime of navigating the quiet psychological tension of sibling rivalry, the harsh scrutiny of the Hollywood press, and the exhausting effort required to maintain a grounded, healthy personal life in a town designed to tear families apart. He emerged not as a flash-in-the-pan celebrity, but as a deeply respected craftsman, demonstrating that enduring stability in the Dream Factory is often a far greater, more elusive achievement than sudden, blinding stardom for the comedic innovators who defined the sensibilities of a generation. The private struggle was often one of breaking free from the suffocating expectations of their own public personas. Steve Martin rose to prominence as a wildly successful, hyper-energetic stand-up comedian, filling massive sports stadiums with audiences who demanded he repeat his absurdist catchphrases ad nauseum. This explosive success created a profound creative claustrophobia, a hidden crisis of identity that drove Martin to abruptly walk away from live stand-up comedy at the very peak of his fame. He chose instead to channel his sharp, deadpan wit into writing, classical music, and complex film roles like The Jerk and Father of the Bride, constantly fighting against an industry that preferred to keep him trapped in a profitable, repetitive box. His modern triumph in Only Murders in the Building represents the ultimate vindication of an artist who refused to let his identity be entirely dictated by the public's nostalgic memory of his youth. Revealing that true creative freedom requires the courage to constantly dismantle your own success as the industry became more corporate and formulaic. Character actors like Kurtwood Smith and Joe Pesci found themselves specializing in a highly volatile, psychologically taxing brand of screen intensity. Smith became a household name as the strict, sharp-tongued patriarch Red Foreman on That 70s Show, a character so brilliantly realized that it threatened to obscure his remarkable, terrifying versatility as a dramatic actor. Years prior, he had shocked audiences as the cold-blooded, sadistic villain Clarence Boddicker in the science fiction masterpiece RoboCop, a performance born from the grueling, unglamorous realities of working within highly demanding, physically intense film sets. Joe Pesci navigated an even more intense professional duality, winning an Academy Award for his terrifyingly unpredictable, explosive portrayal of the mobster Tommy DeVito in Goodfellas, a role that required an immense, exhausting output of raw, violent energy. To protect his own psychological well-being from the dark, draining demands of these iconic gangster roles, Pesci frequently withdrew into long periods of self-imposed retirement, emerging only for projects that allowed him to express his lighter, comedic side, such as the bumbling burglar in the beloved Home Alone franchise, or when working with directors who respected his need for total privacy. The search for artistic authenticity often led these legends down deeply eccentric, hypnotic paths, far removed from the conventional expectations of the Hollywood mainstream. Christopher Walken cultivated one of the most unmistakable, mysterious careers in cinematic history, utilizing a strange rhythm, a distinctive vocal cadence, and a haunting screen presence that earned him an Oscar for The Deer Hunter. Yet the price of this unique allure was a lifetime of being viewed by the industry as a brilliant anomaly, an actor frequently relegated to the fringes of villainy and eccentricity, forcing him to constantly reinvent himself in projects ranging from Catch Me If You Can to the epic grandeur of Dune. Part 2. In a similar vein, Bill Duke used his imposing physical presence and deep, resonant voice to carve out unforgettable roles in muscular 1980s action classics like Predator and Commando. However, Duke's true turning point came behind closed doors, where he fiercely fought against the systemic racial barriers of old Hollywood to establish himself as a pioneering, socially conscious director, ensuring that his legacy would be defined by his intellectual authority rather than his physical, formidable nature. This complex era of transition also highlighted the unique, often bittersweet journeys of the stars who populated the golden age of American television. Individuals whose faces became synonymous with the domestic ideals of a rapidly changing nation. Donahue and Billy Gray charmed millions as the iconic siblings Betty and Bud Anderson on the foundational sitcom Father Knows Best, projecting a pristine image of post-war suburban harmony every single week. Yet, the reality of living as living symbols of an idealized, impossible American family took a heavy toll on both child stars, who found themselves trapped in a nostalgic time capsule that made it incredibly difficult for the industry to accept them as mature, evolving adults. As the decades progressed, Barry Bostwick found his own traditional, masculine leading man trajectory radically derailed when he accepted the role of Brad Majors in the transgressive cult classic The Rocky Horror Picture Show, a decision that transformed him into an eternal pop culture heartthrob, but forever altered how traditional studio executives viewed his potential, illustrating the delicate, dangerous gamble of chasing artistic immortality through the subversion of your own image. The passing of the torch from the classical era to the modern age required a rare form of masculine resilience, a steady assurance that allowed a select group of leading men to survive the collapse of the old studio system without losing their essential identity. James Brolin engineered a career that spanned both mediums seamlessly, using his tall frame, rugged features, and quietly magnetic authority to anchor massive television hits like Marcus Welby, MD, and Hotel. He managed to project an image that was simultaneously polished and unyielding, navigating the relentless glare of public interest and high-profile relationships, while quietly building a second career as a director and producer behind the scenes. In much the same way, Tom Selleck became an absolute titan of television masculinity through Magnum P.I., an iconic role where his relaxed confidence and athletic build defined the aesthetic of an entire decade. Selleck understood the unique trap of becoming a pop culture symbol, choosing his subsequent projects with a deliberate care that culminated in the monumental, long-running success of Blue Bloods, proving that a true gentleman's appeal only grows more authoritative with the passing of the years. This classic, rugged, masculine appeal took on many forms across the television landscape, sometimes transcending the boundaries of time itself. Gil Gerard became an instant phenomenon and a beloved sci-fi heartthrob as the titular hero of Buck Rogers in the 25th century, infusing his spacefaring adventures with an irresistible touch of light-hearted humor and all-American charm that endeared him to millions before his passing. This specific kind of towering, refined presence was mirrored on the international stage by legends like Christopher Plummer, who brought a fierce, aristocratic elegance to everything he touched. Though the Sound of Music made him a romantic icon for generations, Plummer spent the next 7 decades aggressively challenging that clean-cut image, diving into complex, demanding roles on stage and screen well into his 90s, ultimately becoming the oldest actor to win a competitive Academy Award. It was a testament to a generation of performers who viewed their craft not as a fleeting, youth-driven enterprise, but as a lifelong, evolving discipline that demanded absolute devotion until the very final curtain for other stars of this transformative era. The television screen became a powerful platform for personal conscience, allowing them to merge their artistic visibility with a deeper moral mission. Mike Farrell used his understated warmth and quiet integrity to transform BJ Honeycutt into the compassionate, steady moral anchor of the historic series MSH, a show that captured the fractured heart of a nation. Yet for Farrell, the legendary status of the series was merely a stepping stone toward a lifelong tireless commitment to international humanitarian activism, showing that the empathy he displayed on screen was a genuine reflection of his soul rather than a calculated piece of acting. This need to find a deeper purpose outside the exhausting Hollywood machinery drove Marx, the piercingly blue-eyed youth idol who inspired mountains of global fan mail as Billy Blue Cannon on the classic western The High Chaparral, to walk away from show business at the absolute peak of his fame. Slade chose to trade the volatile glare of celebrity for the peaceful, enduring fulfillment of life as a writer and fine artist, proving that some of the era's most captivating figures found their true peace only after they left the dream factory behind. The early 60s also birthed a generation of younger performers who had to navigate the intense, often fickle machinery of teenage idolization. Paul Peterson brought a brilliant, mischievous energy to the living rooms of America as Jeff Stone on The Donna Reed Show, while simultaneously dominating the music charts as a clean-cut musical sensation. Peterson, however, turned his unique experiences into a powerful legacy of protection, founding organizations dedicated to supporting and safeguarding child actors from the inherent dangers of the entertainment industry, turning his own early celebrity into a shield for future generations. Meanwhile, actors like Malcolm McDowell and Franco Nero were completely redefining the darker, more visceral boundaries of global cinema. McDowell became the indelible, dangerous face of cinematic counterculture with his hypnotic, terrifying performance in A Clockwork Orange, embarking on a non-stop, decades-long journey through independent and genre filmmaking that continues to this very day. Nero exploded onto the international scene as Django, defining the very essence of spaghetti western, cool with his piercing gaze and icy composure, a legendary presence that continues to draw contemporary directors seeking a touch of mythic, old-school gravity. As the late 20th century solidified its own cultural institutions, actors like Sam Waterston and William Roach became living monuments to professional consistency, embodying the concept of the enduring authority figure. Waterston spent decades as Jack McCoy on Law & Order, transforming a television prosecutor into a symbol of institutional justice and integrity, cementing his place as an elder statesman of the American dramatic arts. Across the Atlantic, William Roach achieved something entirely unprecedented in the history of global broadcasting, portraying Ken Barlow on Coronation Street continuously since the historic first broadcast in 1960. Roach became a living record holder and a weekly fixture in the lives of millions, an unmatched example of artistic loyalty that outlasted networks, executives, and entire cultural movements. These men proved that true cinematic and television immortality didn't always require a constant reinvention of the wheel. Sometimes it required a profound, steady relationship with the audience that could withstand the turbulent currents of a changing world. The cinematic landscape of the late 20th century was also defined by an unyielding, lived-in intensity, represented by men who chose roles that matched their own raw, uncompromising spirits. Scott Glenn forged an iconic path through masterpieces like The Right Stuff and The Hunt for Red October, bringing a grounded, muscular authenticity to the screen that made him a favorite of directors who demanded real substance over superficial flash. This same era witnessed the absolute peak of Anthony Hopkins, whose fierce, terrifying intelligence in The Silence of the Lambs created an immortal cultural archetype. Hopkins continued to storm through the decades, collecting accolades and jumping between intense thrillers and massive biographical projects with an unstoppable, youthful vitality. Looming over them all stood Clint Eastwood, the ultimate symbol of rugged masculine cool, whose weathered face and quiet authority created some of the most enduring images in film history. Eastwood transformed himself from a stoic Western gunfighter into one of the most respected, prolific directors of all time, standing as a monumental force who simply refused to let age dictate his creative output. Why Eva Marie Saint abruptly walked away from the studio lots that made her a legend, this cinematic exposé uncovers the intense personal and professional crossroads faced by the last surviving icons of old Hollywood, tracing the complex hidden drama beneath the industry's glamorous, historic facade. For more details on the surviving legends of this timeless era, you can explore this retrospective mapping their journeys. Surviving Hollywood Icons Retrospective. This feature provides a deeper look into the rare staying power and enduring pop culture legacy of cinema's greatest multi-decade survivors.